I thank the chairman. It seems like we're hearing a lot these days, probably more than we have in quite a while, from many on the other side of the aisle, that the answer to rising drug costs is more government involvement. I strongly disagree with that. Case in point would just simply be the so-called Affordable Care Act that was signed into law about 10 years, and since that time we've seen drug costs skyrocket in excess of 40%, despite the fact that President Obama over and over, as has already been cited today, said if you like your plan, you can keep your plan, all this kind of stuff. We've still seen the out-of-pocket costs skyrocket, as well as the cost of drugs themselves. So Dr. Roy, let me begin with you. Can you please explain the connection between higher drug costs and Obamacare in particular?
There are two particular policies, well, there's three particular policies, I'd say, in the Affordable Care Act that have driven up, in my view, prescription drug pricing and spending. The first is what we mentioned before, the BPCI Act, which regulates biosimilars and how, as a result, biosimilars have not been getting onto the market. The second is the changes to Medicare Part D, which reduced the amount of cost sharing in the Medicare Part D program, the so-called coverage gap or donut hole. While there are meritorious reasons to want to reduce out-of-pocket spending for seniors, the end result of that lower price sensitivity was massive price increases by manufacturers because they knew that seniors wouldn't care whether the prices were high or low. The taxpayer was on the hook for those extra prices. So we've seen Medicare Part D spending skyrocket as a result. The third area is in the Affordable Care Act's exchanges, where there are mandates that have been issued, that were issued by the Obama administration to require that plans participating in exchanges cover a bunch of branded drugs, even if those branded drugs had no economic value. That is to say, there were generic drugs that could do the job just fine. That's resulted in higher than necessary pharmacy costs in Affordable Care Act-based plans.
So based on what you're saying, let me just throw out a somewhat loaded but sounds like a simple question. Would the repeal of Obamacare lower drug costs for Americans?
It would lower overall prescription drug spending. It may, in certain cases, raise out-of-pocket spending for some individuals who are buying Affordable Care Act subsidized insurance plans, but overall spending would go down.
It just seems to me there's a whole lot more involved to this whole thing of a rising drug costs than what meets the eye. It is a complicated issue, and there's a lot of factors involved. It's certainly more than just greed of the pharmaceutical companies. There are a lot of factors. Dr. Anderson, let me go to you. Can you provide a basic, brief overview of the drug supply chain? And specifically, what I want to know is who pays what price at what point in the chain?
Okay. So
is there any way to do that briefly?
I will do my best.
Okay.
So it essentially starts with the drug company announcing a price called the list price. And then they negotiate with the PBM over the price that the PBM will pay for the drug. And it could be all of that price or most commonly a significant reduction of that price. Then the PBM keeps some of that money, but not all of it, and we don't know how much of that money they in fact keep because that's all confidential. Then it goes to the pharmacy, and they buy the drug essentially from the PBM, and they get a price for it. Again, we don't know what that price is. And then the consumer goes to the pharmacy and buys the drug. They pay the price based upon the list price, the price that the drug company originally set. And that's why the major reason why the prices for consumers have gone up, because those list prices keep going up. The reason why the list price is going up is because the PBMs is saying, if you give us a higher list price, we will more likely put your drug on a formulary.
And then you add into that, as I understand it, the rebates.
The rebates.
So the rebates have, when you factor the rebates in, the cost of the drugs have somewhat been kept under control to the consumer. Is that an accurate statement?
Well, they could be, but we don't know exactly how much, because we don't know how much the PBMs are keeping and how much the drug companies are getting and how much the consumer is paying. So we just don't know that information. So we think that's true, but we don't know.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mr.